So I forgot to ask what I should talk about today. I usually try to corner somebody and go, what should I talk about today? And I forgot to do that. And I also forgot to think about what I should talk about today. So we'll just do another 45 minutes of meditation. You know, if life worked out the way that we wished life would work out, then there would never be any problems, because there's all kinds of systems, philosophical and religious, that say if you follow our particular path, then you won't have any problems. Everything will be good, you'll be happy, everybody will be happy around you. And I think the reason why the Buddhist temples in America actually have anybody in them is because it doesn't seem to work out that way. Bad things continue to happen. Life doesn't always go as we plan it. I get AARP magazine. I am a proud member of AARP. The only reason I joined AARP is to get the magazine, because my doctor had it in his office and I really liked the magazine, but I don't go to my doctor enough to read all the copies of the magazine. And I think maybe it was the last one or the one before that came. It had a long article on prayer, talking about what people were doing and why they did it, and the fact that even though the prayers weren't the prayers weren't answered, they were. It's sort of like Zen double talk, you know. Well, I prayed for this to happen, but it didn't happen, but that's all right because God answered me anyway. So I guess the answer was, pooh, you don't get to get what you want this time around. And so I guess that's the answer, because everybody kind of in this article said the same thing. Well, no, prayers, you don't always get what you ask for, but prayers are always answered. And I thought, okay, how does that work out? Well, I guess God is, certainly there is this image that people have of God, that God's some sort of parent, right? God the Father. And so sometimes parents go, no, you can't have a Coca-Cola at 9 o'clock at night because you won't go to sleep. So I guess that's what the answer with prayer is. Buddhists pray. They had some Tibetan that I'd never heard of. They had pictures of all these nice-looking people that prayed. And they had a picture of a Tibetan guy, and he said, well, you know, when we do rituals and we do ceremonies, we're praying and stuff like that. And I wouldn't argue with that, because we make statements, or at least I do when we're doing ceremonies, that can only be construed as prayers. So the question always becomes, who is it, or what is it that we're praying to? Well, I have a good answer to that. Now, 30 years ago, I didn't have a good answer to that. 30 years ago, I'd go, I don't know. And of course, there's the great misconception that people have about Buddhism, that we pray to a statue, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but actually it's kind of useful. If we really did pray to a statue, then we could pray to a rock, a tree. Oh, it's making more and more Buddhist sense now. Yeah, we could pray to anything. We could pray to the universe. And that's what I feel like that I'm doing when I say the words that come across as a prayer. Psychology, we mentioned this in our sutra class today, or I mentioned it. Psychology is the last 20 or so years, I don't know how long it's been, but anybody that sees this video that wants to send me articles on this, I'll gladly accept them, because I've been looking for an article that was in Parade magazine 35 years ago. I even went to the Parade magazine website looking for that article, and it wasn't there, about happy people. And happy people experience gratitude. Now, the thing that has not been identified about happy people is that they pray. The article that I read so many years ago had different things that And you know, that person right there, Jane, she should be able to bring me books on this, shouldn't you, Jane? On happiness.
It's a big world.
Yeah. But, you know, now they study what happiness is, not just what unhappy people are, which is what psychiatry and psychology was for so many years. We'll understand unhappy people. And now they've kind of turned, it's not what everybody's doing, but there is this group of people. And one of the things they came up with that I mentioned today is self-absorption, not self-absorption, absorption. That people participate in an activity where they basically time disappears and they forget themselves. And it could be building models, it could be painting pictures, it could be gardening, it certainly could be meditation, to where people stop thinking about themselves all the time, because that's all we ever think about is ourselves. Or by extension, we think about the way somebody treated us, or when the rent is due, or how come somebody's so mean to me. But it all comes back to ourselves. So that when we start doing an activity that we really, really like, that draws us away from ourselves, so that one thing about it is time seems to disappear. I don't think it stops, it's just we stop being conscious of time. So I've known since I was very, very young that if you're doing an activity you really enjoy, time's gone, right? Back in the old days, you did not have to stand in line for an hour and a half to get on a ride in Disneyland. I went there the second year. You only had to stand in line for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. So you went on the Jungle Cruise and you forgot about time. Or your grandma took you out for a hamburger and an ice cream banana split. I used to get those out of my grandma when I was young. And you forget about time. You become totally immersed in what you're doing. That's one of the signs of a happy person. Because remember now, science looks at, okay, there's a happy person. Steve looks like a happy person. I'll ask Steve some leading questions here, because good science is observation. Steve, tell me about yourself. And Steve goes, well, you know, I collect stamps. And every evening I get my stamps out, and for 45 minutes I play with my stamps. Honest to God, I had a stepfather that had collected stamps. I never could figure out what he did with them. You know, he'd open up his book and he'd look at his stamps. But time would sort of stop for him. And maybe he'd have to be reminded it's dinner time, because he stopped thinking about his stomach and he just looked at his stamps and moved them around with his tweezers and stuff. A sense of gratitude. I have to say that I almost always say a prayer in the morning. And please don't ask me who I'm praying to, because I don't think I'm praying to a person. I'm praying to the universe. I'm praying to the trees and the rocks and the sky. Because I think all of those things listen. I don't think they answer. I just think they listen. And I usually make some sort of comment about what a great day it's going to be, what a great day it is, how happy I am to be alive. Look how green everything is now in the desert, things like that. But that's a sense of gratitude. And I've had a sense of gratitude for a long time. I'm very grateful about my health, which has been going downhill for the last couple of years. But I'm here. So that's what I'm grateful about. You know? And there's always, this thing about life is there's always two sides of it. There's the side where you can feel sorry for yourself every day when you get up. Steve looked today like he was having a little bit of a hard time. He was holding himself very stiff. But he's still smiling. He's smiling right now. So we can have a sense of gratitude, or we can just spend all our time feeling sorry for ourselves and complaining about the missed opportunities, complaining about the things we used to have that we lost. Everybody has things they used to have they lost. Okay, I had a 1960 Chevy Impala with a 327 engine in it and a 350 transmission, and I don't have it anymore. And I can tell you where it is. My brother drove it off the road to Kern Valley, and it ended up in the top of a pine tree. The good news was he and his future wife were not killed. They were able to literally climb down that tree, but that's where that car went. And that was really my first car. And boy, was that a fabulous car. I've never had a car that was like that since. So I could spend a lot of time complaining about I don't have that car. But it's just a happy memory. Now I have what I call my sport truck, which is the first time I never let anybody drive anything. First vehicle I ever bought, an 04 F-150, first brand new vehicle I'd ever owned in my life, and for 6 months I wouldn't let Brian drive my truck. Nobody drove that truck until some of the new got worn off. That's the good side. I still have that truck. It has 180,000 miles on it. Okay? And it's still the best truck I've ever owned, because I can throw all kinds of stuff in the back of it, and it really drives well. It gets lousy gas mileage, but Brian's got a Jeep, so I know he gets lousy gas mileage with that. Okay? So I don't ever worry about the gas mileage. I just pay the gas bill, which sometimes is a little outrageous. But I'm so glad I've got something to put gas in. What a marvelous thing. So there's always two sides, right, Jane? It's just which side you want to pick. Forget about the half full glass. It's just which side you want to pick. I was in 2 tremendous car accidents. Both of them I got T-boned. The first one, the lady had a bottle of whiskey between her knees. She came over and said, "I'm so sorry, and this is as the policeman's going, "Come, get in my car and let me put the handcuffs on you." And completely destroyed the car. When I got out of the car, it was sitting, it had 4 wheels, but only 3 of them were touching the ground. Okay? The insurance guy came out and looked at it the next day where they towed it to, and he just called me up and said, "Okay, you want to come by and pick up the check, and you can go get yourself a replacement car, because there's nothing worth saving on this car." I was so grateful to the universe that I walked away from that. And I tell people, put your seatbelt on. I don't care what you do, put your seatbelt on. Because there's no doubt, as that door flew open, as we were spinning around like this, that I would have gone straight out of that car into the street and got run over if I hadn't had a seatbelt on. So I'm grateful for seatbelts, and I'm grateful that that car was made as well as it was, and I was grateful that I just walked away from it. And cars can be replaced. Just isn't a big deal. But it's a little rough when you get all banged up and then you got to deal with that. But then, of course, you could be grateful for a wheelchair, couldn't you? You sure could. Imagine the time when they didn't have wheelchairs. And you spent your whole life in bed because you got your legs all broken up. There's always a better way of looking at things, no matter what happens. So how do we do that? Well, I think we do that with meditation. I think we go into meditation and we have to forget about ourselves. We have to suspend time because we are so self-absorbed. I always call ourselves the animal that talks to ourselves. The constant running, it's like we have ADD for talking to ourselves, constantly talking to ourselves about what's going on in our life. And never have any time to listen to life, to listen to the universe. Because there is something going on there, whether you call it a voice, or you call it music, or you call it magic, or whatever you call it. There is something going on. I love our trees. I'm sure all of you have noticed at one time or another, depending on the time of the day, but of course in the high desert like this, particularly, in the wintertime we get it all the time. But even in the hot summertime, when the sun goes down, the wind comes up. And if you stand anywhere on this property, anywhere around this temple, it sounds like a stream running. And as a kid, when we go camping, I used to always think, where's that river? Where's that stream? And it was just the wind blowing through the pine trees. And so I'm so happy that we have trees. For a while we didn't. We planted a bunch of trees and then we lost our water. And I had to let the trees die. But I was really, really grateful there was enough water left to flush the toilet. Yeah, because that would have got pretty dicey if it hadn't have been. So we need to kind of move away from ourselves and move away from the things we wish were and see what we have left after the things that we wished were. And what we have left is pretty good if we use it and we appreciate it. But if we don't appreciate it, then we're miserable all the time. So you get a short talk today.